Howdy there, guys. This is Parker from the Catholicism in the Car podcast. I just want to do a quick kind of run through here of uh, part of a book that I've been reading. This is The Reform of the Liturgy from 1948 to 1975 by Annibale Bugnini, who was the secretary of the Concillium, which was basically um, the organization, the group of people that were tasked by Pope St. Paul VI after and during the Second Vatican Council to kind of bring together the what they considered at the time the greatest minds, greatest liturgical minds in the Church, on and therefore to construct a reform of the Roman Missal in accord with the Second Vatican Council. And so, wherever you fall, kind of on the liturgical debates, I do think that this book is uh, incredibly valuable. Um, Here, and I'll zoom back to the cover here. So this is kind of the cover, what it looks like, um, and it's a pretty long book, as you can tell. It's over 1,000 pages. This is on archive.org that I found this copy. There are actually a number of copies of it on this website. And what's great, what I think is particularly great about archive.org is that down here you can see, I think you should be able to see uh, that uh, it has a little headphone icon. And so, say for me, what I do most of the time is on my commute to work, I will listen to these this book. I'll listen to this book, and I'll listen to it on 2 times speed, even, uh, which is kind of helps me get through it a lot faster. Because as you can see, it's basically a 1,000 page book. Really, his uh, Annibale Bugnini's memoir um, of the construction, for lack of a better word, of the reform of the Roman Missal. Okay, and I want to get us to page 640 here. Let's see. So page 640 begins the section, it's part 5 on the sacraments, and it begins the subsection there on communion in the hand. And so as I've been going through this book, I'm around page 700 now. Um, excuse me. And sorry. And I'm around page 700, but at one point through this reading, I had kind of skipped forward to this section on communion in the hand because I'm preparing for a debate, kind of, where I'm actually going to be arguing in favor of communion in the hand, even though I am not actually in favor of it. It's kind of an Oxford style debate, which is hilarious because I've never done a debate before. So we will see how this goes when I actually do it. It'll be on the Deus Vult podcast, which some good friends of mine, Father Daniel Kale and Father Stephen Felicia, they are the hosts of that podcast. So anyway, in my reading, I had kind of jumped forward at one point to read this section in order to kind of prepare for the debate. And there were a number of things in this section that hit me, but chief among them is really there's a few pages ahead. He kind of lists out uh, what he considers to have been the greatest arguments for communion in the hand and the greatest arguments against communion in the hand at that time in the early 70s when this was all kind of coming to fruition. So now, just to give you a basic overview of kind of the history that he goes over in this section, um, he really doesn't hide the fact that that the calls for communion in the hand in the Western Rite of the Catholic Church were originally done out of dissent. It was mainly, as you can see here on the screen, mainly Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, and France, um, who were really petitioning the Holy Father and the Holy See, the Vatican, for the permission to uh, to practice communion in the hand, and they weren't just petitioning; they really just went ahead and did it. Um, he says here basically. The bishops found it difficult to suppress the new practice of communion on the hand, and uh, and as these requests for this change in the reception of communion continued, um, they came especially from Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, and France. Okay, and then the book kind of goes through. It gives a number of quotes from the Secretary of State, and then further down it gives stuff from a bunch of the bishops as they're trying to talk about this, um, and then some letters from the Pope, things like that. So and then on page 643, he finally he gets into kind of what I want to talk about today. Um, these arguments given in support of communion on the hand, and then a few pages later he gives the arguments against. And I'm going to be honest, I was pretty baffled, particularly by the arguments given by supporters of communion in the hand. So let's go through this. And like I said, I'm preparing for a debate to uh, to defend the practice of communion in the hand, even though I don't personally believe in it. But trying to steel man the argument is my goal. Um, and I'll have to say I probably wouldn't use these arguments as they are given here, and it's sad because this book I believe was published in 1975, um, so this was a very live debate at the time, um, and a lot of people embraced it, and a lot of people did not embrace it at all, and so um, and the drama of this question of communion in the hand, of how to receive communion in the Western Rite has played out over the last 60 years. Um, and a lot of the arguments are still the same in many ways. Although, I mean, I'll be honest, the arguments given here in support, like I said, they're not very good, in my opinion. And so I don't see many people really arguing in this way today for communion on the hand. And I'm still trying to formulate my steelman position. Um, I think really what it comes down to is arguing about authority, and that it is a practice of discipline, and as long as certain measures are put in place to particularly prevent particles from uh, falling to the ground unnecessarily, or not being consumed unnecessarily, right? Uh, then communion on the hand can be a practice that can, I think, be really supported. Um, but I think it's only if we take certain measures to really protect the Eucharist while we're doing it. Because that was the main reason, in my understanding, why communion on the tongue really developed as a practice uh, in the mid to late first millennium, and then throughout the second millennium, right? Anyway, so let's go through these arguments in support first. So he says, number one, communion in the hand does not touch the dogma of the Lord's real presence in the Eucharist. It's simply a matter of ecclesiastical discipline, and therefore, they're arguing we should be able to have this practice. Now, this argument taken alone, not a very powerful one. There are plenty of things that I could argue are solely matters of discipline, but they would not be healthy for the church. And I would certainly say that the adoption of communion on the hand as a mode for reception was not a healthy uh, reception. And somewhere within this section, I can't remember exactly where. Um, I'll try to find it in a bit, but Bugnini kind of records that the Pope had said, Pope Paul VI had said, if um, if this practice brings new life into the church and brings a deeper understanding of the Eucharist, then we will keep it. But if it does not, we'll get rid of it. Um, and obviously, I think it's plain to see that the church's faith in the Eucharist has waned dramatically over the last 60 years. This is why in the United States right now we are having a Eucharistic revival, and I believe it's in 2024 next year in Indianapolis. There's going to be a giant Eucharistic conference, but then most dioceses in the U.S., if not all, are trying to do local, um, make efforts locally to increase catechesis on the Eucharist and increase reverence for the Eucharist. That's a whole nother ball of wax that we could get into at some point. But I would argue that we really have not seen the fruits that the church desired, and that the church, um, when giving this concession for communion on the hand, um, they made it with some caveats, right? And one of those caveats was, if we don't see faith in the Eucharist increasing, then uh, this practice should be done away with. And again, I'll try to find exactly where that was within this section, but believe me, it is in there. And this whole section goes from, I believe it was page 640 to like 690, something like that. It's a fairly long section, about 50 pages, but it's wonderful. I learned a lot from it. I've learned a lot from this entire book, to be honest. Um, and I'd like to do more videos like this, kind of going through the different parts of this book that really struck me, because it's a, as you can see, 977 pages, and I don't even think that includes uh, the beginning ones and the like index at the end maybe, um, but it's a pretty hefty work to make your way through, and a lot of people probably don't have the time nor the desire to do this, to read this book. So I think some videos are in order, and I haven't seen a ton of videos on this, to be honest, of people giving overviews. So, I may not be the best person to do this, but if I'm the only person doing it, I think that's something. I'm trying to put something out there on this, to educate people. Um, and I might do a video later on my thoughts kind of on the book as a whole and all this kind of stuff. I will say just briefly though that I would certainly recommend people to read this book, um, and I do think it's uh, it rubs against the grain of the traditionalist narrative and of the conservative narrative and of the progressive narrative. Okay, I don't think um, that any summarization of the history here uh, can really be. I don't think this book can be put into a box. All right. I don't think that Bugnini's memoir can be put into a box, and I don't think he's a villain. I don't think he was. I don't think he made the best decisions. No, I do not. But but I don't at least subscribe to the idea that he was this villain that some people make him out to be. Okay, I'm particularly thinking of uh, oh goodness, the Mask of the Ages films. I believe it was episode 2 when they went into some of the history, and they really make Bugnini out to be quite a villain. in that video, and I think that's a bit of an injustice to his memory. Um, again, like I said, was he a great guy? Did he make great decisions? I don't really think so, but I don't think we need to villainize him for that. Yeah. So anyway, let's see. So number two, this method of receiving is not a real innovation, okay, but on the contrary, was the only one used throughout the Christian world from the beginning until the ninth or 10th century, so the end of the first millennium. I've seen some people uh, put it date it earlier than that. I know that I read one article saying that in the Western Church, in Rome in particular, the practice of communion on the hand really stopped around the fourth or fifth century. Okay, um, which doesn't necessarily invalidate this sentence, but may shed further light, contextual light, on the issue. So anyway, during the latter period, the use of unleavened bread became general in the West. Yeah, that's true. And this change seems to have promoted the distribution of communion by placing the particle on the tongue. And yeah, and you can also see in many of the Eastern rites, particularly the Byzantine rite, the development of using a spoon uh, with the leavened bread and doing intinction, where you dip the body of the bread into the wine, the blood, right? And then you feed it to the priest, or the cleric will feed it to the laity on a spoon. Okay. Um, I'm not quite sure exactly when that practice, the Byzantine practice, began, but I would guess it was sometime around the turn of the first millennium, or the turn of the second millennium, the beginning of the second millennium. Okay. Number three, nor can it be said that reception of the host in the hand shows less respect for the Lord than reception on the tongue. On the other hand, the faithful, including children, readily understand that they are receiving the body of the Lord into their hands, and that they must treat the consecrated bread with the greatest respect. Um, what's funny is later you'll see that this one, number three, is directly contradicted by those who argue against communion on the hand, um, by saying that kids don't always have very clean hands. You'll see kids, at mass. My kid does this. They rub their nose when their nose is snotty, and they get tons of they're eating snacks or whatever during mass. And I mean, if your kid's going to be receiving communion, he shouldn't be eating snacks beforehand. Obviously, right? He should observe the fast. But kids are kids. Um, Kids get dirty hands. They're crawling all over the pews and everything, and they're not always the best at washing their hands. So, like, uh, there were a lot of bishops at the time, and this kind of becomes clearer as you go through this whole section of the book. But there were a lot of bishops arguing that, you know, um, if we are going to allow communion on the hand, it should only be for adults, and it should only be particularly for adults who have the ability to have really good hygiene. I believe it was the Portuguese bishops. They talk about later. The Portuguese bishops said, like, hey, like, pretty much all our people are farmers working in the fields, and like they don't have clean hands, and that's fine. So like they're not going to want to receive communion in the hand, and it seems like it just be confusing for people, like, because they're not going to want, if they have dirt all over their hand, caked into their hands, whatever. um and it's not like there's, at the time, in certain places there's obviously not always great methods of hygiene. Okay, the church is a worldwide organization, so it has to take into account many, many different situations. um And so because of that, people are coming with very dirty hands, and they even understand, that they don't want to receive our Lord right into their hand that's got dirt caked on it. Okay. It's not a terribly reverent thing. Um, so when it says here that, this mode of reception it doesn't show less respect for our Lord than reception on the tongue. And then talking about kids, uh, that one is just kind of a silly, to me, it's kind of a silly argument. Um, it just makes me chuckle. And you'll see, like, most of these arguments in support, they're they're honestly kind of laughable. They are. Um, and it makes it it makes my job harder to defend in this debate coming up, to defend communion on the hand, knowing that these were the arguments at the time that were being thrown around. So, okay, number 4. The traditional way of receiving the host on the tongue seems infantile to our contemporaries. It is too like the way of children are fed who cannot eat by themselves. Many adults now feel ill at ease in the public performance of an action that has no outward attractiveness and makes them resemble children. This one, this one is, I'm sorry, this one's shameful. I think it is. Um, for us to think that coming before God, that we should somehow be offended to take the posture of a child before our Creator, um, I think it's a complete misunderstanding of human dignity. Like, if the Holy Trinity came down right now in front of you, well, let's take a biblical example. What happens every time an angel, just an angel in the Bible, comes to a human being? What happens? They prostrate themselves on the ground and they feel like they're going to die. These are grown men, these are patriarchs at times, prophets, Elijah, Daniel, Jeremiah, Moses, Abraham, um, Mary, uh, in the New Testament. There's just countless examples. Just an angel coming to them. They not only do they take the reception of the child, they take the reception of a worm, basically. They utterly prostrate themselves on the ground, and that's just an angel. My goodness. Um, I think that there is a reality to emphasizing this point too much, emphasizing our difference from God and our kind of lack of dignity before Him. Okay, there can definitely be an extreme there that we should avoid, right? To the point where we're downgrading our dignity. All right, but I think there's also an opposite extreme that's being exemplified here in number 4. That is like, you know, I am a dignified human being, and um, I should be able to stand up straight before my God and act as an adult before Him. Sure, in one sense, okay, I can concede that, but in another sense, you clearly you clearly don't understand the biblical idea of God, and the reality of God, if that's kind of your idea. Um, he is the one where if he stops thinking about you for 1 millisecond, you will cease existing. He's the one that will kill you eventually, either uh, by allowing you to die in a certain way or potentially by explicitly killing you. Um, as many instances in the Old Testament testify. So that one, that one really gets me. Yeah. All right, number 5. More than in the past, our contemporaries are sensitive to considerations of hygiene. Some some individuals are so nervous that it is difficult when giving them communion to avoid contact with their tongue and saliva. This in turn makes others reluctant to receive communion on the tongue. So so you think that, like, you know, how many people even today in America, where we have really great methods of hygiene, how many people wash their hands before going to mass or going up to communion? How many people wash their hands? Probably almost no one, except for maybe during the time of COVID, where people would use hand sanitizer like it was, you know, I don't know, around every corner, which it kind of was. But anyway, now that COVID's gone, people don't wash their hands before receiving communion. They don't. I mean, maybe some do, but the vast majority of people do not. Um, so to say that it's more hygienic, uh, you know, I mean, I've certainly had people when I receive on the tongue to where, a finger will get stuck in my mouth. That definitely happens, right? But um, I just think that oh, there's my Roomba going. But anyway, yeah, to think that that for some reason receiving on the hand is more hygienic, uh, that's just kind of funny. Anyway, number 6, in many places the faithful receive communion while standing, and the priests of short stature have some difficulty in placing the host in the mouths of those who are taller. There is also danger of the host falling to the ground, especially when priests are obliged to distribute communion rapidly because of large numbers. Okay, okay. So this one, um, this would be easily fixed if we didn't stand at communion and we knelt, because then basically even the shortest of priests uh, could distribute communion easily. All right, and then there's also danger of the host falling to the ground, especially when priests are obliged to distribute communion rapidly. This one, I'm like, they I don't think that they understood what they were doing. I see hosts dropped on the ground so much more frequently when people receive on the hand than when people receive on the tongue. Um, I mean, think about it. Like your tongue, the host, it sticks to your tongue once it hits your tongue. It's not really going to fall off, um, and you can then close your mouth and it's in there. But when you receive on the hand, I guess unless your hand is insanely sweaty, uh, which also, this part of the book discusses that people should not have super sweaty hands and receive communion because then the particles will much more easily get stuck to their hand, and that's an issue. Um, but unless your hand is super sweaty, if you tip your hand just a little bit, the host is going to fall off. So I'm just kind of baffled at a lot of these, or all of them, really. So number 7, in some dioceses, laypersons are allowed to distribute communion. It seems less appropriate for them to put the host on the tongue of the communicant. I don't even think that one is worth engaging with. like, um, yeah, they don't even, they're just making an assertion there. They don't even give a reason. So anyway, uh, number 8, so in countries and regions where the new practice of placing the host in the recipient's hand has been introduced, it seems increasingly difficult, if not outright impossible, to halt the practice. Yeah, so this one's basically, they're saying, hey, in France, Germany, Belgium, all these places, they've begun distributing on the hand, and we don't know how to stop them, so we should just let them continue. And instead of trying to fight them on it, we should just bless what they're doing, basically. And this one, the same argument could be made that, because most Catholics do not um, follow Humanae Vitae, most Catholics use contraceptives. Okay, that therefore the Pope should just allow them to uh, to use contraceptives. Like he shouldn't make disciplinary actions. We should get rid of the um, the penalties uh, for confession, not just obviously the mortal sin, but also or I'm sorry, for the penalties for using contraceptives. Not just get rid of the penalty of mortal sin, but also any other types of penalties associated with it, right? Um, ecclesiastical penalties. We should just get rid of those. Okay, sorry, my recording software kind of bugged out on me there for a second. So I think I'm only going to have time to, in this video, finish the arguments in support, and I think that's fine because um, I find them quite entertaining, to be honest. So this last argument is basically, because we can't, no, this is number 8 here, right? Number 8. Because we can't stop them, we should just let them uh, do what they want, and we should allow communion on the hand. So what do they say? In countries and regions where the new practice is placing the host in the recipient's hand has been introduced, it seems increasingly difficult, if not outright impossible, to halt the practice. This is evident from the efforts already made by bishops to reverse the trend even when the authority of the episcopate and the Holy See is invoked. In periods of profound challenge, such as the present, it is desirable that authority not be flouted for maintaining a ban that it would be difficult it would have difficulty implementing. On the other hand, authority would be strengthened if the hierarchy were to provide detailed guidelines for regulating the new manners of communicating. So, like I was saying, this exact argument could be made against the Church's position on contraception. Okay, because the vast majority of Catholics uh, do use contraceptives, then therefore uh, the Church should not take a um, a disciplinary stature towards them. Okay, they say, what do they say? They say um, in periods of profound challenge, such as the present, it is desirable that authority not be flouted for maintaining a ban that we would have difficulty implementing. Yeah, so you know, I've heard Michael Lofton make this argument a lot, and I really agree with him on this point that many of the ills in the church today could be solved uh, if proper discipline were uh, were maintained. Okay, if we would excommunicate the people who need to be excommunicated, or if we would actually follow through with certain penalties for the people that need to have penalties given to them. The whole debate in the U.S. Um, right now about who can receive communion. Like the church is very, very clear in her teaching that somebody in mortal sin cannot receive communion, and particularly somebody who is a notorious um, notorious sinner, public sinner, or somebody who holds to heretical views or views contrary to the morals of the church, that 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 therefore you know that they should not receive communion. The whole debate about Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden and all that fun stuff. Um, if the church were just consistent in not only its teaching but also following through in that teaching with discipline, when that teaching is ignored, I think we would be in a much better spot as a church. There would not be as much confusion. Um, it would heal a lot of things. So, and this number 8 here is incredibly antithetical to that view. So, anyway, I think that'll conclude this for now. Next time, I will go through. You can see here the reasons against receiving communion in the hand. I think he gives like 6 of them. Yeah, 6, and they're pretty good. Uh, yeah, I thought the reasons were actually really good. So anyway, if you're interested in reading this book, The Reform of the Liturgy, 1948 to 1975, by Annibale Bugnini, I would highly recommend it. Again, you can get it for free on archive.org. You can listen to it. It is electronic, um, an electronic voice, right? It's not like an actual audiobook, but if you can get through that, um, I think it can definitely maximize your efficiency in getting through reading. So I've at least found that for myself. So anyway, thanks y'all.